So Harlan couldn't join us tonight, but Harlan, Pete, and I kind of put this together, the three of us. The three of us read the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And I don't know if any of you guys have read the book, but white fragility is defined as the discomfort and defensiveness on the part of white individuals when confronted by information about racial inequity and injustice. So it's a topic that seems to be particularly pertinent right now, this year, given all of the events that have happened around all of the racial injustice that has happened this year and continues to happen. And there needs to be racial equality, I feel, that needs to move forward. So we have a video right now that it's an interview with Robin DiAngelo about her book that we wanted to show for everybody to watch here. Kind of summarizes the book if you haven't read it. So I think we're going to play that now.
Fragility. That's the title of your book, is White Fragility. And the subtitle is Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Why white fragility, and how do we recognize it?
You know, the fragility part is meant to capture how little it takes to set white people off, to set us off into defensiveness. So for many white people, the mere suggestion that white has meaning will cause us to erupt in defensiveness. For many of your listeners, the fact that I'm generalizing right now about white people will set off the defensiveness. Individualism is a really precious ideology for white people, and we do not like to be generalized about.
So let's back up a second and talk about how you got interested in this work and in this subject. I know that you're an academic, I know that you're a lecturer, and you've done, what would you call it, anti-racist training?
Yes.
Or used to be called diversity training. Maybe
Yes.
It isn't called that anymore.
I think of myself as somebody who came from practice to theory rather than a lot of academics who go from theory to practice. So I applied for a job in the early 90s for a diversity trainer. That's what we called it at the time. I thought, of course, I'm qualified to go into the workplace and lead people on discussions of race. I'm a vegetarian. How could I be racist? I had that really classic, liberal, open-minded kind of idea about what it meant to be racist. And I saw myself, of course, as outside of that and felt qualified. And I got the job. And I was in for the most profound learning of my life. It was a parallel process. So two key pieces were, one, for the first time in my life, I was working side by side with people of color who were challenging the way I saw the world. And part of being white is that I could get that far in life. I was a parent at that point. I was in my 30s, and never had I had my racial worldview challenged, one. Two, definitely not by a significant number of people of color, and not in any kind of sustained way. And it worked like a mirror, right? I was like a fish being taken out of water. I would not have been able to tell you I had a racial worldview, because as a white person, I was raised to see myself as just human. Now, you're a particular kind of human. I'm just human. And if we're going to be talking about race, I expect we're going to be talking about your race, not my race.
You tell some very interesting stories in this book. For example, you talk about leading a seminar where 38 out of the 40 people in the room were white, and then one of the participants literally pounds the table and yelling that, white people can't get a job. And everybody who had a job there was white.
It's a kind of delusion. I think that, some people have said when you're used to 100%, 98 feels oppressive, right? As a white person, I was just raised to expect the world to be mine in absolutely any field. I see myself represented. I see myself represented in all my teachers and my curriculum and my heroes and heroines. And so even the suggestion that we need to make sure we're being fair and including other people seems to set the white collective off.
Tell me some of the things that you saw in these workshops that led you to this theory.
It's a lot like water dripping on a rock, right? I didn't get it the first, second, third, but it's so consistent and so patterned that it's like a script. And after a while, you can just stand there and say, I can predict what this white person is going to say right now. And sure enough, they say it. So I was taught to treat everyone the same. I have people of color in my family. I was in Teach for America. That I marched in the 60s. I taught in a diverse school. The evidence that white people give for their lack of racism is very revealing to what we think racism is. And everything I do is to try to get us off the surface, which is all this all these narratives, and get under there to the underlying framework. Because despite all those narratives, I was taught to treat everyone the same, I don't see color, our outcomes haven't improved. By virtually every measure, there is racial inequality in this country, and by many measures, it's increasing, not decreasing.
You speak very frankly in the book about how you've stepped in it yourself, if I can use that phrase. Can you give an example of where you experienced your own white fragility?
So I'm in a room with 3 black women, 2 of which I'm very close to, and 1 I don't know at all. And she gives us a survey to fill out, and it's tedious to me. It seems kind of template. It doesn't capture the nuance of what we do. So I push it aside and I say, let me explain. We go out into these different offices and we do these anti-racism trainings. In fact, Deborah here was asked not to come back when she went to such and such office. I guess her hair scared the white people. She has long locked braids. So I want you to notice what I'm doing. Not only am I making a joke about a black woman's hair, which is a sensitive issue, and I do know better, but I'm positioning myself as the cool white person, and they're all the clueless white people. And I wish I could tell you that I recognized I was doing that. I didn't. Meeting's over. A couple days later, the assistant Marcia comes to me and says, Angela was really offended by that joke you made about black women's hair. And I immediately, oh God, thank you. And I called Angela and I said, would you be willing to grant me the opportunity to repair the racism that I perpetrated towards you in the meeting last week? She said yes. We sat down, we talked about it, and she said, I don't know you, I have no relationship with you, I have no trust with you, and I do not want to be joking about black women's hair in a professional work meeting with a white woman I don't know. I hear you, I apologize. Then I asked, is there anything I missed? And she said, yes. That survey you so glibly shoved aside, I wrote that survey. And I have spent my life justifying my intelligence to white people. Own that, apologized, asked, is there anything else that needs to be said or heard that we might move forward? And she said, yeah, if we're going to work together, I'm sure you're going to run your racism at me again. And so the next time you do, would you like your feedback publicly or privately?
Interesting.
Well, I love her for that. I said, publicly, in my case, please. It's really important that other white people see that I'm not free of this, but it gives me an opportunity to model non-defensiveness.
You said you don't want white people to feel guilty, which is exactly what I think some people listening to our conversation will feel and will think that you want to evoke. So why do you say you don't want white people to feel guilty? Well,
because you didn't choose your socialization. You didn't choose your conditioning. You were born into a society that set you up in these ways. You don't need to feel guilty unless you know that and you're not doing anything about it.
What about
Go ahead.
the people who voted for Obama and then voted for Trump?
I think that Obama was symbolic. I think what Obama did was allow us to feel really good about ourselves under very narrow terms, right? If the word racism ever came out of his mouth, I don't know what would have happened, right? He had to be the perfect black man, right? The safe black man. He's also brilliant and clear and educated, and so that also at the same time that allows me to feel good about myself. There's also a little bit of challenge there in how powerful a black man he is, right? And I would ask any white person who voted for Obama and sees that as kind of their evidence that they're free of racism, to ask themselves, how did it change your life on the ground? How did Obama's presidency change the live experience for black people in this country day in and day out? I don't think that it did. It was important symbolically, but mass incarceration, school to prison pipeline, these things have not diminished, right? In many ways, they've increased.
Do you see Trump as a reaction to Obama? And if so, why?
I see Trump as a reaction to Obama because Trump gave permission to the resentment that was roiling under the surface.
Resentment of what?
Of black advancement, of black uppityness, of, to use a Jim Crow analogy, you will step off the curb when I come down it. You will not look me in the eye. His racism is explicit and undeniable, and that wasn't a deterrent. I think white people have to look really hard at. Why was that not a deterrent to you?
Robin DiAngelo, thank you for talking with us.
You're welcome.
That's kind of her summary of the book. I don't know how many of you have read the book there.
But folks, you can either physically raise your hand, or there is a little button for raising your hand to see how many have read the book. And then I was curious of what your responses are to what you just heard, or if you have read the book, to the book. So first of all, could you raise your hand if you have read the book? Okay. So now you've all seen the video though. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I have a question about what objection is raised by the critic of the book?
Well, Pete's going to get to that next. I just wanted to hear some of your thoughts before we get into the other side.
I'm kind of interested in reading the book now.
Okay.
Yeah, she kind of sparked an interest there. I want to know.
Yeah, that was very much an introduction to it, and
but there's also been some criticism of the book as well. I know that John McWhorter, he's a professor, has written a pretty critical review of the book as well. Several other people have written critical reviews of the book that are not in favor of it and don't say that it's a very good book of what white individuals should be doing. And I think Pete's going to summarize.
So,
can I see? Yeah.
so John McWhorter is as Ashley said, he's a professor of linguistics, a regular contributor to the magazine The Atlantic, and he's African American. And the quickest summary of his, well, first of all, he certainly says that he believes that Robin DiAngelo is certainly an honest person and trying to do the right thing, but that unintentionally she does some things that he doesn't care for. And the quick summary would be to say he believes that she diminishes the ability of both white people and black people to respond to the problem. He said it renders white people speechless and paralyzed to act would be the way he would describe the effect on white people. He says the problem is, I'm gonna just quote some things that he says support that position. The problem is that white fragility is the prayer book for what can only be described as a cult. Remember that you are not to express yourself except to say amen. Namely, thou shalt not utter, I know people of color, I marched in the 60s, you are judging me, you don't know me, you are generalizing, I disagree, the real oppression is class, I just said one little innocent thing, you hurt my feelings. By the end, DiAngelo has white Americans muzzled, straitjacketed, tied down, and chloroformed for good measure, but for what? And herein is the real problem with white fragility. DiAngelo does not see fit to address why all this agonizing and soul-searching is necessary to forging change in society. One might ask just how a people can be poised for making change when they have been taught that pretty much anything they say or think is racist and thus antithetical to the good. What end does all this self-mortification serve? Impatient with such questions, DiAngelo insists that, quote, wanting to jump over the hard personal work and get to solutions is a foundation of white fragility. In other words, for D'Angelo, the whole point is suffering. And note the scare quotes around solutions as if wanting such a thing were somehow ridiculous. So that's her critique in terms of the effect he believes that D'Angelo is having on white people. In terms of black people, he seems to think, or he thinks, that the book makes black people seem hypersensitive and helpless to address their own problems. Again, to quote him, a corollary question is why black people need to be treated the way D'Angelo assumes we do. The very assumption is deeply condescending to all proud black people. In my life, racism has affected me now and then at the margins in very occasional social ways, but has had no effect on my access to societal resources. If anything, it has made them more available to me than they would have been otherwise. Nor should anyone dismiss me as a rare bird. Being middle class, upwardly mobile, and black has been quite common during my existence since the mid-1960s. And to deny this is to assert that affirmative action for black people did not work. So there are a couple of thoughts by John McWhorter, and they reflect some thinking I've heard from other African-American scholars who have been debating some Black Lives Matter people. And I should note that all of them who've taken this position, I've heard anyway, have been African-American males. I guess we're breaking into small groups, right, Ashley? And how many
Yeah.
groups we have? We have
I'll
three,
just make
four,
2
five,
groups.
6, 7, 8.
We talked about one, a conversation I had with Ernstine and Al after one of our last sessions where their daughter's video played, and she's so intelligent and wonderful. And I called them to say how powerful I thought the video was, but then I couldn't come up with the words to express what I was trying to say. And I said, well, I can't think of anything other than to say how articulate she was. And
Yeah.
and I didn't mean it, I only meant it in a complimentary manner, but I knew going into that, I'm like, I know this is not the right word, but that's all I can think of to say. But anyway.
Well, that was we had similar kind of conversations in ours, but anybody know where Leslie might be?
But who?
Leslie. I'm sorry, Ashley.
Right there.
Oh, she came
I'm
out
here.
Just
Oh, I'm
right
sorry,
there.
Ashley. I didn't see you. The old Brady Bunch. I didn't see all the children there. But so Ashley, do you want to facilitate a conversation here?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
Do we want to talk about the questions again, or do we just want to have a group discussion about, thoughts on the book and, the opposing views of it?
Well, we as a group didn't have, what questions were there?
Yeah, we didn't have questions.
Oh, you didn't?
They're fairly
Oh.
generic kinds of questions. One of them is, what did you think? What things stood out for you or surprised you? And how does it affect you in some way? And if possible, tell a story about that illustrates some of that. So I think we could talk about any of those.
Yeah. Did anything in the video for you guys surprise you that she said, or was it all kind of stuff that, was things that you had, I don't want to say expected, but
Well,
can't think of the right word.
I did read the book.
Oh, you did? So what did you think, Al?
I did read the book, and the comment I made in our group, I'll try and recreate that, was the criticism from the black reviewer, I think, was off the mark a little bit, because in one perspective, the book is very helpful in helping to expose the fact that there is a facade of things behind which the true feelings about racism are hidden and not being expressed by the white community. And certainly it is not one that I did not say this before, but it's not one that the Black community is ready to try and break through and crush through, so to speak, on its own. But I did not think that it's in the way of the words of the book and the way she presented things. She does not muzzle white people about expressing what their views are as far as racism is concerned. In fact, she's more than open in at least expressing what her experience was in being, quote, educated, unquote, on where her racism stood and how she felt about things. I made the further comment that the criticizer comes from a background which I find similar, having come out of the 60s myself and been somewhat successful, probably more than somewhat, been successful in the white world. But I don't feel the same way he does, that we should not, that what she had to say was wrong, and that the opportunity for opening up and talking about this racism should not be, I'm going to use a word I shouldn't use, should not be repressed. I think it's something we should be working on doing.
Yeah.
Exploring in all opportunities, every opportunity that we have. Period.
If I can follow up on that a little bit, and with regard to what Elena said, and part of his criticism had to do with certain phrases that you're not supposed to use. And I mean, I think the idea behind that is just what Al was saying, which is, you know, there's this surface level of trying to hide from what you really need to be looking into about yourself. And you have certain ways of dodging that. On the other hand, to simply suggest that there's certain phrases that you should never use may not accomplish the purpose that she's really after. If the end result is to make you afraid to talk because there are these little little landmines that are all around that you don't want to step on. So I think the way to approach that would be to say that the conversation needs to be contextualized in terms of what the situation is. And I had a similar experience that Elena had with a friend of ours, an African-American woman who was on I guess it was a panel that was televised, and she was the only one of the three panelists who was really prepared. The other two panelists, I don't remember what color they were, but they just
Didn't speak well.
no, not at all. And so when I saw our friend, I said something about that she was very articulate. And then I realized what I'd said, just kind of like Elena did, and kind of stumbled around, kind of apologized, and we laughed about it a little bit. And so, I mean, I think that having hard and fast rules about what you can say and not say, I think the context and the way you handle it is maybe more important than trying to remember a list of phrases not to say.
Well, that's what I took away from that video clip that we had. Her ability to have that conversation, that follow-up conversation
Right.
with that woman to get to what was bothered, what about it got to her. That was the point of the whole thing to me, is
Right.
that we're going to slip. We're going to say those things, probably.
Yeah.
But to be able to go back and have a conversation about that and to follow up and see, okay, where did I go? Tell me about it. What did that do to you? What is it that got triggered? And
Right.
let's talk about it.
I think that's a big step, though. That's that's hard for most of us to do. And so, I mean, I haven't read the article in a while, so I don't know if he actually said there are phrases you should not say. But I think, you know, what I'm gathering out of Robin DiAngelo and other things I've been reading like this is that we white people need to think not just about what we want to say, but what's the impact it's going to be on the people that hear what we're going to say. And maybe if we start thinking of it that way, we'll change some of what we're saying. I don't think someone being articulate is necessarily a problem, but there are things that I say, that all of us say, that I think if we stop and think about it before the words come out, we might find a better way of expressing ourselves. Or if we don't, be receptive. And Ernstine, if you don't mind, I actually put you on as an example in ours, but I said, you know, there have been times that Ernstine has clarified to us, you know, that bothered her, the way we said this or that. I don't know, you know, what example it might be. And I didn't feel anybody, you know, got off the call because they were angry or anything, but that's how we're going to grow and learn.
And that's true. I think that
get a little bit more into the mic.
I think that you have to, as Nancy said, that having the opportunity, if something is said, and it's something that we did a year and a half now almost, that having that conversation and being respectful and being able to say to one another, you know, you said this, and let me tell you how that affected me. Right. And being able to speak to one another and go back and say, this bothered me.
Right.
And that's really important. But we have to have the conversation so we know that this hurts. This is not comfortable. Yeah. This is not comfortable. But I also think that there's really a sense that each of us has to have about sensitivity in how we talk to all people. And if you wouldn't say it after you've seen a presentation by one of your white colleagues, then think about it before you say it about a Black presenter. And I think Philip said something in our group that I think was just fantastic. The general expectation when there is a Black presenter is that the white audience is not expecting, now get your minds wrapped around this. This is not going to be up to our expectation. They're probably going to do okay. But when the Black presenter does well, exceptionally well, you're blown away. Wow, I didn't expect him or her to do that. And you may not express it outwardly, but in your head, you're thinking, they're not supposed to be able to do that. That's not supposed to come from them. They don't have that mindset. That is not something they're supposed to be able to do. So if you come out of that mindset and say, go into something expecting the same thing you would expect from your colleagues, you won't say, you know, the opportunity to say something that you would not say to your own colleagues probably won't happen, because you go into it expecting to have the same kind of experience that you would have in any white situation.
That background noise there. Is that you?
Yeah.
Not yours, is it?
So.
Thank you, Ernstine.
Yeah, I think that's one good thing to recognize, one thing that I'm noticing though, with particularly my nieces, they don't, I don't notice them really having that, I don't know if I want to say mindset, but they don't really think of things that way. I mean, they just kind of, I really don't want to use the word colorblind because that's a really terrible way to put it, but they just don't see things that way. I mean, they just, and maybe it's a product of how they have been raised, but they just see people for people. You know?
How old are you?
You just
How old am
That's a
I?
beautiful, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful
It is.
thing.
It really is.
That's a beautiful thing. And those four little children that you saw, they see people for people. And they see people for people because that's the way they were from the time they came out of their mother's womb. They were taught everybody's the same.
Yeah.
They may not treat you the way you should be treated, but everyone's the same.
You know what?
Pardon?
It made me think of after Ashley said that, it made me think of my grandsons. I don't think everybody's just everybody.
Yeah.
I,
Yes. And those children, until someone mistreats them, people, their parents and all of us have told them, people are people.
yeah.
And they've not been taught, well, don't like this person because they're this color or that person because they're that color. And that's the only way we get rid of hatred. It starts from the cradle. It starts from the cradle. It really does.
I think if they were listening to what we were talking about, they wouldn't be able to understand what is this. Mind you, my oldest grandson, he's at university now, and maybe he's getting to learn about what this is because he's 18. But normally they wouldn't have we wouldn't know this was an issue. But no, it made me think of that.
It makes me think of. Oh, sorry, Becky.
Yeah, that's not my experience. I mean, the kids. I mean, both mine are one's in college and one's in high school. And certainly we've talked about it a lot in our own household, and they are aware of a lot of issues. And I will give it to the school system that they are talking about it more. There are equity teams, history classes talk about, redlining was covered well. The riot, or not riots, the coup in Wilmington was covered as part of her history class. But I mean, there are kids in her school who have no qualms talking about people of color as lesser.
Yeah.
Like that is not gone. And in fact, it's somewhat common. What I find encouraging is that there is a group of young people who are actually standing up and just going, not around me.
Right.
Just stop. Like and I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, they might have disagreed, but they would have quietly just walked away. Mm-hmm. And now they're not walking away as often. But I mean, Kylie left a job because the owner was racist and wouldn't stop what the employees were doing, which was not serving people of color, which was, talking in really awful language. And Kylie was like, I have to go. I can't stay. So, I mean, I want to believe that it's getting better, but I think this administration has made it very easy for those who think that way to speak it out loud. Yeah. Yes. And it includes teenagers, a lot of them, unfortunately.
And I think, Becky, what you're describing that you're witnessing with the teenagers, and that some are speaking out now and saying, you know, enough is enough. I think we're seeing that as an example with these groups, with us talking every month, is that with the exception of Alan Ernstine, the rest of us could go on about our lives and not have to worry about the problems of the school to pipeline prison or the arrest, racial profiling, things like this. But what way I describe it is I've been bothered enough that I can't be quiet. I've been, some would say woke, I guess, but it's so then what do you do with that? I think part of it is you do speak up when you see it. And so I so admire Kylie for doing that, because that's not easy as a teenager to stand up to.
No, not at all.
I want to share with Becky what you said, though, about the administration. I think it's important to notice the flip side of the coin. This is coming from counseling side, not my intern side, right?
Okay.
As a therapist that I see, is it often excuses those who are more progressive or liberal to say, well, I'm not that. So it almost makes us feel like we don't have to do the work because we have the comparison of the extreme. And so I think there's a danger in that we need to be aware of all the subtle ways. We may not be out on the street with a sign, but we do it every day.
Right, right.
And to be aware of that, which I think these conversations are important.
Yeah. Thank you, Philip, because that, matter of fact, have the rest of you met Philip? It didn't dawn on me until you actually spoke up. But Philip is our intern now at Nativity, and so thank you.
Oh, I read about him.
And now I've forgotten what. But yeah, I agree with you. I think even you know, those of us who are on this call, I think all of us white people have to address our own racism, because we're benefiting from a system that empowers us over people of color.
I kind of think of it like Jeremy gave an analogy not too long ago. I heard him on the phone with someone about when he had his business. He owned his own business for a long time, and he always acknowledged the fact that his goods, he didn't build his business all himself. You know, yes, he did do a lot of the work, but his goods got to market on the roads that were built with taxpayer money, right. You know, and a lot of things that helped him build his business were done by individuals that pay taxes and did a lot of things that, you know, he didn't necessarily do himself there. So he didn't necessarily always, you know, take all of the credit for his business and everything. So I think that's one thing that, you know, we can do. I just completely lost my thought.
Sorry about the distraction here. Pete was taking his phone away, and that's how I've been keeping track of time.
Oh. But I think that
one thing that Ernstine has said before, and I agree, is that I think Ernstine said it, I like the idea of the wording of white advantage over white privilege. Because privilege, people go, well, I wasn't rich, or I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. But the fact is that there is an inherent advantage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's what this book is trying to wake people up to see, is there's just an advantage. You know, Jeremy owning his own business, I'm sure he was given the benefit of the doubt in places where someone who's a person of color may not have been given the benefit of the doubt.
And he was able to get loans of a certain size and stuff, you know, that, you know, people of color may not have necessarily been able to get.
And so if we are aware that this is happening, the first step to changing something is to be aware.
Yep.
Yep.
Carl, you've been awfully quiet. Put you on the spot there.
I don't think I was when we were in the breakout group, okay. And so I thought maybe I better keep my mouth shut for a while.
Okay, okay. Oh, and I should have asked this at the beginning, but I think, we're learning, Pete and I cannot share the computer when we're doing this because I couldn't control the breakout rooms when we were sharing the computer. But I have been recording this, and so it probably did record our conversation, Leslie. But there are some folks who couldn't make the call tonight who would like to hear what we discussed, and I hope you're okay with that. And if you're not, I won't share it. But
no, not
it's
at all.
recording. So,
Carl, I would like for you to repeat what you were saying when we, just for a brief 2 seconds, I think, came into your group before we came back to the original group about how racism can really be tackled. I may be saying that wrong, but you talked about relationships and how there's only one way it can really happen. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was beautiful.
Well, thank you. What I was talking about was based on an article that I sent around to the environmental justice today. And what the idea here is that all of us have racial bias, and we have it because as we were growing up and through our school experiences, through our family experiences, all of these things, it shaped who we are today. So it's ingrained. I always refer to it, it's on our hard drive. And whether or not we acknowledge it or recognize it is something else. But the point of this article is that we can't just go to a 1-hour seminar or maybe even 2 or 3 hour sessions and walk away and have removed that racial bias. But we have the free will to do that, but it takes hard work. It's like anything that we have, whether it's our political feelings, how we feel about climate change, or any of these things. They're all part of who we are. And to change, what we have to do is we have to do like Becky said. She realized it was wrong, and she thought about it. And she said, I'm not going to live my life this way. And it's hard work, but we can do it if we will take the time to try to get over that, what is racial bias. It's just not going to go away by snapping our fingers. It's going to take some hard work, and it's going to have to change we have to change ourselves as individuals to do it. And a big part of that is what I set up is we have to do what Bishop Curry is saying we need to do. We need to get out in the build a beloved community. We need to build relationships with one another and listen to one another and understand one another, and then think deeply about how we can change and shape our own lives so that we can get rid of these inequities, the racial bias. That's basically what I was saying.
Very good, Carl. Thank you.
Pete, one thing I was thinking, you said the story about Baxter and how your father pointed out that he was a better person than quite a few other white people in his life. Now, that was interesting.
Well,
because I didn't grow up in that environment. Everybody was white in my world in England, but no, that was interesting because your parents were very racist, weren't they? There was white and there was black.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was part of culture back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
A big part of life was mill towns, cotton mill towns. In North Carolina, furniture companies, coal mining communities. And they often had, these were often sort of self-sustaining communities that were kind of run by the white owners of the companies. And the only jobs that black people had were menial jobs, janitorial kinds of jobs, cutting grass for people and that sort of thing. And I've told Al this story, and I've mentioned it to Leslie tonight, that when I was growing up, my dad was a big football fan, and every Friday night we would go to football games at the White High School in Winston-Salem, which is Reynolds High School. And there was this black guy who would cut our grass, and I would take him water. My brother and I would take him water. We got to kind of know him a little bit. And one Friday, my dad said, okay, boys, you ready to go to the football game? So we're all dressed, but he was going in a different direction. And he said, we're not going to Reynolds High School. We're going to Carver High School because I want to see Baxter's son play. And so we went to this football game. We were the only white people in the stands. And my dad and Baxter, what they had in common is that they both really liked football. And so one day my dad, who was really, he talked to my brother and I, and he had this really bothered look on his face, like he was about to tell us something horrible. And in his mind, I think maybe it was something horrible. And for him, but he said, boys, I hate to tell you this. I'm not sure he said it quite like that, but he said, I just want you to know, you need to know this. Baxter is a better man than most of my white friends. And my dad didn't talk a whole lot, so we were really surprised to hear that. And he didn't have anything else to say. He didn't try to explain it or anything. It was just like, that's another part of the gospel you boys need to know. And so I'm not sure exactly what we were trying to illustrate with that point, but it does.
So most of these,
nothing else.
In these towns, most of the black people, I presume, had not had that good an education. Different from the black high school and the white high school.
Yeah, it was still in the middle. This is before this would have been in the probably early 50s, before even Brown versus Board of Education.
But but I'm gonna pause right there for a second, because in the research I've done, like in Wilmington and so forth, and so I don't think it's probably unique, and Alan Ernstine, you can comment on this, that the black schools weren't funded like the white schools were, but they got an excellent education. And maybe there's some that wasn't the case, but and I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank of the high school in Wilmington, but that's where there are a whole bunch of famous people went there, and I'm drawing a blank. Ralph Sampson, not Ralph.
Althea Gibson.
Yeah, she did. Who's the basketball player?
White schools were?
Michael Jordan, I think, went there. And I mean, but they talked about it was a really good education they received, but they didn't have the supplies and the resources that the white schools did.
Oh, I think I've read that. Yeah.
But Alan Ernstine, you can comment.
I cannot speak to that. I went to the school in the north.
Okay.
Well,
I can speak to it partly. I went to a school in South Jersey, which, believe it or not, is more like the South than it is the North. But I don't know how the schools were paid for, but there were separate schools. There were two primary areas in town that were black, sort of like black settlements. And there was schools in the black area and there were schools in the white area. And the one place where they did come together for integration was in the high school, because I guess they couldn't afford more than one high school. So we did have an integrated high school. But I don't know how it was funded. I do know that the school I went to for grammar school had two classes in every classroom. We didn't have enough rooms for separate classrooms for each class. So the eight grades leading up to high school were two classes in each classroom, held by one teacher.
Wow.
Being taught by one teacher. So clearly funding was a challenge, a problem there.
Right.
In South Jersey.
I'll say I don't know that that's changed that much. Having done undergrad at UNC and then graduate level work at Duke and then at North Carolina Central, there's a vast difference in what's available on those campuses. And Duke, aside from being private, if you take just UNC and Central, the way resources are allocated,
Right.
the availability to different technology, it's vastly different. And so it's perpetuated throughout today in various ways.
Yeah. Ashley, you want to give some of your thoughts on the book?
My personal thoughts?
You don't have to. I just didn't know.
My personal thoughts on the book, I went into it really wanting to, I was very enthusiastic to read the book because I had a strong desire to educate myself on things better, to become a better, more of an ally, so I could advocate more, I guess. I don't know if there's a right terms, but I really wanted to read the book and everything, and I started reading it, and I really didn't like the book. There's not anything in that book that I fundamentally disagree with at all. I just think that it's a poorly written book. I didn't like how she wrote the book there, how it was presented or anything. That's just my thoughts on it. So.
Well,
That's a
and
disappointment. She was such a good speaker.
Cheryl,
What now?
say that again?
Go
Cheryl?
ahead, Cheryl.
Oh, I said that's a disappointment because she was such a good speaker.
The video, she presented things a lot better in that video than it is presented in the book.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
now I don't read the book.
Well, I don't want to color your opinion of it.
Oh, I know.
I really don't. But my personal thought is she repeats herself a lot of the same thing. I'm inclined to agree with what John McWhorter says and his opinion of things. There were a couple of things that he said. He said, to atone for this original sin, she is devoted to endlessly exploring, acknowledging, and seeking to undo whites' complicity with an investment in racism. To D'Angelo, any failure to do this work as adherence to this paradigm often put it renders one to racist. And that's essentially how I felt after reading the book. I felt like that anything I said was going to be considered, I would be considered a racist for saying or doing. And it did not leave me with any way to improve myself. Yeah, sorry.
No, I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and that's why I wanted you to share yours. You know, I read it this summer, and to be honest with you, I can't remember a whole lot right now. I didn't review it for this call. I found it helpful to just check myself, basically, to kind of, you know, be aware of things I'm saying, because I'm finding in some of the work I'm doing with Higher Ground, because I'm working with a team of all Black people on the team, and I'm finding myself having to say, oh, did I just say that? Or, you know, so it's been helpful for me in that respect. But,
Becky, have you read the book?
I started it. I got maybe a third of the way. A little like Ashley, I felt like it was a little heavy-handed, maybe, but I also don't know if that's because of where I am. Like I kind of was like, yeah, I get what you're saying, you know, but then she would be very repetitive. You know, what I said in our small group is, to me, this book and Waking Up White and So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo, they're the places that you start. You're not supposed to live here. You know, they're the places that you start being able to see the issue. You know, we've had such, as white folks, often we've had such blinders on that just filter out what's going on around us. that these types of books are the ones that go, hello, you know, this is going on, but you don't live here. This is just part of the journey. It's the beginning part where, you know, someone kind of shook you a little and said, you know, here's what's going on. And, you know, so I give it a little leeway because of that. You know, this isn't, you're not supposed to sit here and live in, I can never say anything or do anything, but there is some onus on you to educate yourself before you go like a bull in a china shop into anti-racism work. Like, you need to listen to people first before you go in and start saying everything that you think needs to happen. So like Beth, I don't super have a strong opinion about the book. I read about a third of it. It reminded me of some other books that I'd read, and I kind of let it sit. But, you know, all of those books are a good place to start, or a place to start. But then you need to keep moving, in my opinion.
Yep.
One thing I felt like with this book was, I don't know that anybody who is interested in doing the work would pick this book up and say, oh, let me continue. You know, I feel like after reading this book, they would say, well, I'm pretty defeated about this. I'm just not even going to try here, you know? And I also felt like she's talking to people that are already interested in doing the work there. And the people that need to be reading this book are the people that she's never going to reach, in my opinion. So
that raises a reasonable question. How do we reach the people that we haven't reached?
One thing I thought of was, if you encounter one way to reach people or to start doing something and be actionable is when you encounter, you know, friends or family. I mean, because we have family members that don't necessarily believe white privilege exists, is just take the time to explain to them what it is, and that, you know, they have indeed benefited from it. Right. You know, whether they like it or not, you know, they have indeed benefited from white privilege, you know, and try and make them understand what it is from there. That's one thing that you could easily do as an action there. That's just one thought that I had.
One of the things I was sharing with Leslie in our very small group was conversation and towards the end of Sacred Ground, and I don't think Sally would take offense to my sharing this, but the action thing is not to just observe something and walk on by, but to become an more than just an ally, but allyship. And reason I bring up Sally, she came in one day and said she saw this Black woman being pulled over by a cop, and she didn't see anything that happened illegally. And so Sally stopped her car and wondered if she ought to go over there and just stand with the woman. And I don't remember what Sally decided, but for us to actually, to be, if we're really going to be allies, to take a step and actually kind of walk in the shoes and be there in support of.
Or maybe just when you see something that doesn't look right, start videoing.
Yeah.
You know, whether it turns into something that isn't, you know, that is or isn't, you know, a problem. You never know what that video could be useful for later.
Yeah,
that's true.
One of the things that I am going to suggest that the environmental justice subgroup looks into is the Farm to Church program, which is being proposed by RAFI USA. there's a African-American fellow by the name of Jared White, who is a RAFI person who is trying to start within communities in North Carolina relationships between Black farmers and faith communities. For example, right now there's about 13 churches in Raleigh that are interested in starting a CSA with local Black farmers. And it's not the only idea. I mean, one of the benefits certainly is going to be increased income for the Black farmer. But what the Black farmers and what RAFI wants to do is wants to see relationships built between the church communities and these farmers to get them involved with the congregations, to get to know one another and talk with one another and understand each other. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that Nativity will look at, and maybe something that we might be able to go ahead with. I circulated the information to the Environmental Justice. If others of you would like to have it, I'd be happy to share it with everybody. A number of questions about it that need to be resolved, like, are these going to be individual families within the faith community, or if the church has a kitchen and they could use the food in their kitchen, that's another way it could happen. But anyway, I think in doing things like this, and it can be part of building community and helping us all to understand and get along better with one another. And anyway,
you all benefit from it. Yeah, and that
I would agree with you, Carl.
Yeah.
I notice our time is starting to get away from us, but I will also add that the Racial Justice Committee, we are pursuing 2 avenues right here. And Becky, you're going to have to help me remember the name of the organization that helps with legal. You're muted.
The NAACP Legal Defense Fund.
Okay, so we're going to collect money for the Day of Giving for that, but we're also pursuing, we've got a committee working on developing a scholarship fund for Black students in North Carolina. So we'll get you more information when that comes about. But Ashley,
yeah, Carl said. Yeah, but Carl.
I don't know that I do, but Carl, if I may have it, but if you could send it to me again, I'll send it out to everybody.
Okay.
I'd be glad to. So Ashley, first of all, thank you. Really appreciate this. She and Harlan worked for a while, and with Pete as well, and then she's been talking with us, so put a lot of time into this, and I really appreciate it. The 28th, Stephanie, I think, agreed to come and meet with us. She wasn't a yes or a no. It was like, oh, okay, kind of like that. So I will be talking to her tomorrow. Do folks? Last time we talked, everyone was talking. I mean, I think everybody was talking about how fearful they're feeling with the election and everything coming up. Do you still want to meet on the 28th? Do you want? And what kind of focus should I tell Stephanie for that? Let me do. Maybe ask the first one. It's raise your hand if you would still like to meet on the 28th. Let me see your hand. Okay, so there are enough folks that are interested. Are there ideas of how you would like to see us approach that evening?
Will it be an evening or an afternoon meeting?
Yeah, we usually do the afternoon on the 2nd.
Well, that's true, but when I wrote people, only one person said they needed the afternoon, and so I told Stephanie probably the evening.
Okay, no, that's okay.
I think we should be a little more specific about what we want Stephanie. Why are we?
Yeah.
That's why if you have ideas, I mean, I talked to her about how so many of you express fear about, what's happening in our country and everything with the election coming up. And she has a very theological, this is why I quickly changed my name from Stephanie to Beth, because I couldn't give you that theological background to help ease your tension. So she can address that, but is there something more that you're looking for? And maybe Philip can help us with this.
Honestly, I think what I'm more afraid of is after the election. because either way it goes, I can see there being problems,
Okay.
violence, either violence in retaliation or violence because it is now again condoned.
Is that kind of where other folks are too?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll be talking to Stephanie tomorrow and give her that heads up, and we'll send you all information about the call. I meant to look up today, and I forgot to, who's on for the first part of November, but I'll get that to you as well. I'll look that up and see who's on. It might be Lillis, but I can't remember right now. I think they're out of town this week.
I did share with Stephanie, I get emails from Forward Movement, and I don't know, maybe you get them too, Beth, or anybody else does, but I did get one the other day, and it is Forward Movement and the Episcopal Church have gotten together, and there's going to be a 9-day prayer session focused on the election, and it starts October 27th and ends, the last day is November 4th.
Okay.
So,
well, if you want to send that to me, if you want to send that to me, I'll get that out to folks as well.
okay, I will. And I downloaded and you can download it, and it's like two-sided, and it has the prayers, and it has a little whatever. I haven't read it all.
Okay.
And I imagine it's more to, you could do it individually or maybe in a group, and sometimes maybe it's more supportive to do it in a group.
Right.
So if you want me to, I will definitely send it to you.
Yeah, please do. Please do. So with you leading then the conversation to prayer, can we initiate you tonight, Philip, and ask if you will close us in prayer?
Yes, Ashley.
I know, she just texted me.
Oh, she did. Well, if I can find one, I'll pull one. If not, let's make one. I'll bring my old.
Sorry about it. If you'd like, we'll get you to do it another time, but.
You know what? I'm not going to use the book. I'll just pray. How about that?
How about that? Off the top of your head.
All right. God of all grace and love, thank you for conversations, for bringing your people together, for reminding us who we are, whose we are, and the work you call us to do. Ask your blessing upon everyone gathered tonight, all those present in spirit and those present physically. Be with us and guide us as we move forward into your world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Why don't we do a quick introduction, because Philip may not have met most of us. We are Pete and Beth, obviously.
Right.
This is Pete. I am Beth. And then y'all just go ahead and introduce yourself to Philip here.
I'm Leslie, Philip. Leslie Troen.
I'm Cheryl Wechter.
I'm Nancy Cherry.
I'm Becky Showalter. Been going to Nativity 24 years now, I think. Long time.
Einstein Moore.
I'm Al Moore, and we're the outsiders. We're in Atlanta, Georgia.
But they used to be at Nativity, and so they're still our family.
Yes, they are.
Elena Noble.
I'm Ashley Klaas.
That leaves you, Carl.
Carl Siegel. I think I might be the only charter member in this group. All of you have, I think, joined after we had started Church of Nativity.
I came the second Sunday. Carl.
Okay, good.
But I wasn't.
So listen, I'm going to end with one funny story here, and then we will get off. But listening to all of you saying, "Oh, I've been going to Nativity for 24 years," or whatever. Our son used to be on the vestry at our church in Virginia, and we were searching for a new rector, and I was on the search committee. So we were sitting in this big circle, and the vestry members were going around introducing themselves, and they said, "Oh, well, I've been going since I was 6 months old," or so forth. And I don't know, there must have been about 15 people or so. And he got to my son, he says, "I'm Rob Crone, I'm an alcoholic." As everybody just because y'all are just too serious for me. All right. Well, thank you all. Unless Ashley, thank you so much for putting this together for us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Peter.
night, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.